Sometimes people approach this in what I would consider to be the opposite order of what they should really be doing. In my mind, the investments are the final stage in the process that a family needs to be going through. That's the engine that makes everything else work. That's what's creating the return stream, the yield, the long-term wealth engine appreciation that's filling up the various buckets and providing for the family to be able to achieve what it is that they're trying to achieve. That really is something that you can't understand what it needs to look like until you've done all the other work up front. Understanding a family might have 5, 6, 10 different entities. You might have a family foundation or donor advised fund, a family limited partnership, a retirement plan. You have your kind of spending needs that you are needing to fund from assets inside of your state. Oftentimes you've set up some sort of generational skipping trust, some sort of a spousal lifetime access trust. You have all the different kind of entity structures. Each one of those might have its own unique investment strategy and needs because the time horizons are different. When we think about how you would evaluate for kind of risk as a starting point, you'd say, okay, there's 3 pieces. There's an ability to assume risk, and that would be measured by the time horizon, the liquidity needs, and the overall level of wealth compared to what is being spent annually. So moving from ability, you would have willingness to assume risk, and that's what I would call sleepability. How do you feel when the market sells off 30% in 22 days? We just lived through that. Some people look at that and it terrifies them and they can't sleep at night. And it's a very different reaction than somebody who looks at that as one of the great buying opportunities that they'll ever have in life. So that willingness or that emotional response to risk or to volatility would be something that's very important to work through. And then finally, what is the need to assume risk? And the need is really simply a discount rate that we need to be able to achieve to be able to hit whatever our target is. If I'm starting with $10 today and I need $20 in 10 years, well, I need to achieve around a 7% return to get there. Now, a family foundation that's going to exist in perpetuity has a 5% required annual minimum distribution, and you want the assets to be able to achieve growth after inflation and that distribution over time. That's going to have a very different profile, especially because it's a tax advantaged account and doesn't pay income taxes, versus something that potentially is inside of an IRA, which if a family has substantial wealth, the IRA is a very interesting entity because it's the last thing that you want to pass down to your kids. Because from a tax perspective, they're only getting a very small percentage of what the total value of the IRA is, because assuming you have an estate tax liability, then those assets as they're distributed are going to be taxed from an income tax perspective, and you might only get 25 or 30 cents on the dollar there. So you might utilize that IRA more for gifting strategies right now, and you can at this point take $100,000 tax-free distribution a year to give to charity. So that's kind of a planning aspect to it. That generational skipping trust, you might own an underlying operating company, or you might own a ranch, for instance, that's a guest ranch or something. So each one of those different buckets that you have totally different profiles surrounding them, different ownership interests, different beneficiaries. Some trusts might have one of the parents as one of the beneficiaries as well, and so there needs to be some liquidity provision there. You might have another that is intended literally to be a 50-year asset that is not even going to be touched by Generation 2, and it's really intended to be Generation 3 and beyond. You also then might have a family bank, which is becoming more of a prominent theme. And that would be a trust that is not intended to ever distribute out, but it's intended to be a permanent source of capital for family members to access once they've gone through the appropriate vetting and due diligence of whatever that board is that sits at that family bank level, but allows family members to be able to have access to cheap capital that needs to be repaid over time. That's treated in a very different way. So when you think about the investment side of things, there's so much that goes into analyzing what the optimal structure for the family is to allow them to achieve kind of that vision for what it is that they're intending to do. And then that investment piece is really that final component that kind of bolts it all together, that allows everything to work mechanically. But I think oftentimes people start with that up front, and I think that that's not serving the family's long-term interest in the best way.